Alright, so welcome to my video updating the issue, the case where the Christian website designer won her case about not having to create a website for same-sex marriages. And regardless of what you think, whether it was a right ruling or a wrong ruling, the fact is it was based on a fabrication. The Supreme Court listens to cases that have standing, which means it actually affects them. This was based on a completely made up client. So, legal experts have weighed in. So let's get to the article. A Christian graphic artist who the Supreme Court said can refuse to make wedding websites for gay couples pointed during her lawsuit to a request from a man named Stewart and his husband-to-be. The twist? Stewart says it never happened. The revelation has raised questions about how Lorie Smith's case was allowed to proceed all the way to the nation's highest court with such an apparent misrepresentation, and whether the state of Colorado, which lost the case last week, has any legal recourse. It has served as another distraction at the end of a highly polarizing term for a Supreme Court marked by ethical questions and contentious rulings along ideological lines that rejected affirmative action in higher education and President Joe Biden's $400 billion plan to cancel or reduce federal student loan debts. Now, before we get into the case, the ethical questions they're talking about is Clarence Thomas being buddy-buddy with Harlan Crow and getting all these special favors, and Clarence Thomas is trying to have us believe that it's completely innocent, that they're just old friends, even though this started happening after he became a Supreme Court justice. So either Clarence Thomas is extremely naive, or he's trying to pull a fast one. And now Sam Alito is having ethical issues raised. I think he took a plane trip and it was financed by someone who actually does have business in front of the court. At least Harlan Crow. Yes, he's a fascist. I'm not going to even say conservative. I mean, the guy has Nazi memorabilia. Come on. He has a shrine. Is a shrine to Hitler. This is, we can say he's a fascist. And he at least doesn't have business in front of the court. Even though he is a conservative, and you can say that that would sway Justice Thomas. Now, that would be in theory, because I'm pretty sure he would have done what he did regardless. But anyway, it's still bad optics. In Sam Alito's case, it was someone who had business in front of the court. So, and of course Samuel Alito came up with some stupid response. I don't remember the details. But anyway, those are the ethical questions. And actually, even Sonia Sotomayor had an ethical question around her, something about a book. But I don't remember the specifics of that. Okay, so here's a look at the legal questions surrounding mysterious would-be customer Stewart. Okay, what role did the claim play in the case? About a month after the conservative legal group Alliance Defending Freedom filed the case in Colorado federal court in 2016, lawyers for the state said it should be dismissed partly because Smith hadn't been harmed by the state's anti-discrimination law. Smith, who did not plan to start creating wedding websites until her case was resolved, would first have to get a request from a gay couple and refuse, triggering a possible complaint against her, the state argued. Smith's lawyers maintained that she didn't have to be punished for violating the law before challenging it. But she should try to violate the law first. What? In a February 2017 filing, they revealed that though she did not need a request to pursue the case, she had in fact received one. An appendix to the filing, including a website request form submitted by Stewart on September 21st, 2016, a few days after the lawsuit was filed. It also included a February 1st, 2017 affidavit from Smith stating that Stewart's request had been received. Okay, so we've got two things here before I continue. So the lawsuit was filed before anything had happened to this woman. You know, she didn't get a request. She didn't get punished for violating anti-discrimination laws and before she filed the lawsuit. And only then was this supposed request filed. Now, as I had pointed out in my last video about this, it could have been a troll. But since this happened after she filed the request, I'm going to say that this smells fishy as hell and that somebody on her team or maybe an acquaintance or something did this to try to bolster her case, to, try to help her out. Because that's bizarre, especially given the fact that this guy said, yeah, I never did that. I had no intention of working with her. So, yeah, this is getting fishier by the day. All right, two documents Smith filed with the Supreme Court briefly mention that she had received at least one request to create a website celebrating a same-sex wedding, but do not elaborate. The request stated that Stewart and his fiancé Mike were looking for design work on things like invitations and place setting cards for their upcoming wedding. We might also stretch to a website, the form said. Lawyers for Colorado wrote in their brief to the Supreme Court in August that it did not amount to an actual request for a website, and the company did not take any steps to verify that a genuine prospective customer submitted the form. It's not clear whether the state took any steps to verify whether Stewart, whose contact information was included in court papers, was a real potential customer. So, basically, the Supreme Court ignored everything that happened before because they just desperately wanted to tell people, yeah, you can discriminate against people you don't like. Yeah, I can see why people are worried that this is going to have more far-reaching consequences because, well, the Supreme Court definitely did everything they could to ensure that they just gave the outcome they wanted regardless of the facts. Stewart told the Associated Press last week that he didn't even know his name had been invoked in the case until he was contacted by a reporter for the New Republic, which first reported his denial. Stewart, who declined to give his last name for fear of harassment and threats, said he was incredibly surprised, adding he has been married to a woman for 15 years. So I don't know who he's worried about getting harassment and threats from, but at this point it could be anybody. Could the revelation impact the case now? God, I hope so. But considering the Supreme Court never gave a shit before this, I'm going to say no. It's highly unlikely. The would-be customer's request was not the basis for Smith's original lawsuit. Exactly. That request came in afterwards, which I'm thinking was just some friend or a colleague just trying to help her out and bolstering her case. Nor was it cited by the High Court as the reason for ruling in her favor, which is a pity because legal standing or the right to bring a lawsuit generally requires the person bringing the case to show that they have suffered some sort of harm. Exactly. And under no circumstances did she have legal standing. Anyway, but pre-enforcement challenges like the one Smith brought are allowed in certain cases. If the person can show they face a credible threat of prosecution or sanctions unless they conform to the law. In other words, I desperately, desperately, desperately want to break the law, so let me do that. What the hell? But like I said, we know the name of the business. It's 303 Creative. We know her name. So, she can create her business. She can continue with creating wedding websites. But again, I really wonder how many people are going to want to do business with her. I'm sure there's plenty of bigots who agree with her that that same-sex marriage shouldn't be legal because she somehow gets to have a say in other people's civil rights or something. But for the most part, based on, if you go by polling and how the LGBT community is accepted for the most part by society, I don't see her getting a lot of business. Again, I don't know if she just wants this as a side hustle and that 303 Creative would do other stuff and it had no intention of doing wedding websites. But either way, her business is going to suffer. The 10th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals, which reviewed the case before the Supreme Court, found that Smith had standing to sue. How? That appeals court noted that Colorado had a history of past enforcement against nearly identical conduct and that the state declined to promise that it wouldn't go after Smith if she violated the law. Wait a minute. Let me get this straight. Colorado has a history of enforcing anti-discrimination laws, and they didn't show that they would not enforce it in her case, so somehow she had standing? What? If there are other places where you can get standing, then legally speaking, I don't think it actually makes a difference. What? Said Jessica Levinson, a professor at Loyola Law School. Okay, I read that sentence. I do not understand what I just read. If there are other places where you can get standing. Oh, I see that if there are other ways to get standing in the case. Okay, I got it now. However, it could have affected the case by undermining the credibility of Smith's legal team, potentially causing the judge to look more skeptically at everything else they filed, Levinson said. It could also result in potential sanctions against Smith's legal team if it turns out they knew Stewart's request was false, Levinson said. Okay, so what I'm understanding is that the court was operating under the assumption that this was a legit request, that it didn't come out until later that this was a bogus request. Okay, I'm following the timeline now. While the revelation cannot change the decision, it's something that should have come up in the litigation, said Irvin Cherminsky, the dean of Berkeley Law, because then what the court should have done is say, we have doubts about this. We can't resolve it. We send it back to the federal district court. I'm sorry. Didn't the original court know this was bogus? How did it go from the original court knowing that it was bogus and all of a sudden people are acting like it isn't? What the hell? Oh, wait, maybe... Yeah, because the original court knew that, they operated as if we do not know if this is a legit request. And all of a sudden, that concern was dropped. So, that concern was there already. I don't understand why these higher courts didn't take that into account. Kristen Wagner, the president of Alliance Defending Freedom, who argued the case before the High Court, has said her client doesn't have a way of doing background checks on those requesting business, nor is it her responsibility to do so. Well, actually, if you want to be a bigot, you might want to do that. You don't have a way of doing background checks? You don't know how to Google? Really? How old is this woman? On Monday, Wagner slammed suggestions that her client made up the request, adding that its more likely scenario is that Stewart or another activist did in fact submit the request. Or, like I said, an acquaintance of hers is trying to just help bolster her case and submitted the request. It's entirely possible she did not know that it was a fake request. It's entirely possible her friend did not tell her that they were doing this. So it's entirely possible she had no idea. However, to assume that it's the bad guys that are at fault, why would they do that? Anyway. And they're claiming that this guy still did it, even though he's like, no, I didn't. To say that Lori Smith or ADF fabricated a request for a same-sex wedding website is a lie, she said in an emailed statement. It would make no sense to have fabricated a request because one wasn't required by the court to decide her case. True. It seems like it wasn't required, but I wouldn't put it past the Alliance Defending Freedom to make shit up. They do it on a daily fucking basis. Alright, has anything like this happened before? An error like that, especially at the level of the Supreme Court, is highly unusual, legal experts say. Probably because they got the response they wanted. Assuming the allegation is correct and that this was something that was factually incorrect, I've never seen anything that blatant happen before, said Adam Feldman, who follows the court as the creator of the Empirical SCOTUS blog. Lawyers have, however, had to walk back statements made to the court before. The Solicitor General, who represents the government before the Supreme Court, apologized in a court filing this year for an inaccurate statement made to the court during oral arguments over a 2017 patent case. Solicitor General Elizabeth Prelogar wrote that the lawyer was given wrong information by the United States Patent and Trademark Office, adding, "We regret any misimpression inadvertently created by the answer that was given." Okay, that doesn't say if it did anything. The court has also included errors in its own rulings. In 2017, ProPublica published a review of several dozen cases in which there were found several false or wholly unsupported factual claims. Among them was an error in Shelby County versus Holder, which struck down part of the Voting Rights Act. The publication reported that Chief Justice John Roberts included incorrect data in a comparison of voter registration among black people and white people in certain states. And that's where the article ends, but I know in that case there wasn't a retrying of it or whatever. There wasn't it wasn't remedied. So I'm assuming that first case, that patent law case, probably wasn't either. Or maybe it didn't have a bearing on the case. I don't know. I'm not familiar with that case. I don't follow patent law. But I do know that nothing was done with that voting rights case. So, except that in a later ruling in a different part of the Voting Rights Act that was upheld. So, I guess that was sort of a oh, we made a boo-boo earlier, so we're going to do this, and we're going to claim this part of the law or something. I don't know. But yeah, it does suck. We have anti-discrimination laws for a reason, because, you shouldn't be discriminating against people for exercising their civil rights. And until someone says that marriage is not a civil right for, anybody, then only then will I take it that, okay, well, I guess, because, okay, it goes against her religious beliefs, then maybe not do this job. I mean, that just would make the most sense. Why are you doing wedding websites when you know that same-sex marriage is legal? And that there's a chance that you might have to do same-sex marriage websites. Which, again, how does that violate your religious beliefs? If somebody thinks that you actually agree with something that a client pays you to do, then they're not very bright. That's a them problem. And I mentioned that in my first video on this case. This has nothing to do with your personal beliefs. If you have a public business, then you are expected to serve the public. So when people say things like, oh, well, what if a Jewish person has to do a website for the KKK? I'm sorry, if they do reject it, it's because of beliefs. I mean, beliefs of the client. This has nothing to do with beliefs. It's not that a couple is getting married because of any belief. It's their damn right. So it's not something that it's ideological. It is strictly, in this case, the law. And if you don't agree with the law, and if you don't want to serve the whole public, maybe find another job. Because, I have encountered, granted they were legit mentally ill, but I've encountered people with swastikas tattooed on them. I will feel uncomfortable serving them, but I serve them because, well, obviously they're hopefully not, so mentally ill they have no understanding of what the hell they just tattooed on their bodies. But even if they did, even if they were fascist scum, I work for a public business. I can't turn them away. Even though I would love to, not have anything to do with them, I had to serve them. So I fail to see this argument that because it's a creative, an expressive website, an expressive art form. It's an art form. And yes, it's an art form, but it's still your damn job. I mean, Mel Gibson is still out making horrible ass movies. And it's just up to the people as to whether they're going to see them, whether they're going to work for him, whatever. But that is up to the people to decide. So, and Mel Gibson can't say anything about being, blacklisted or something, because, well, if he has a right to free speech, so does everybody else. So the best thing we can do at this point is get that business out into the world, 303 Creative, and, like I said, hopefully that business, well, I shouldn't say hopefully that business goes under, but it will be interesting to see what becomes of that business. I checked before. There were no reviews. There was no Google business. So let me see if... No, this just gives me the court case. Which is too bad. I really would love to know how their business is going. Because it would be very interesting to see what becomes of that business. Because it's now out there. It is getting the publicity, which is probably what she wanted to begin with. Even though she probably truly does have a belief that same-sex marriage is wrong, which is really great, but unless you're a private Christian employer, a private Christian business, that doesn't mean squat. Either you have a business or you don't. So it'll be interesting to see how her business thrives or doesn't thrive. Like I said, I didn't see a Google business for her, but I'm really curious to see how that website business ends up. If it ends up shuttering because, nobody wants to do business, hopefully there's no harassment. I don't want any harassment. I mean, maybe bad reviews. That's fine. Bad reviews saying she discriminates. That sounds perfectly fine to me. But, yeah, bad reviews, or just simply don't do business with her. And let's see. Let's see what happens to her business. I mean, obviously, I do not wish people to suffer because of their beliefs, but in this society, I'm really curious. I really don't think that a business like this can thrive anymore, because most people wouldn't want to do business with a business that would openly discriminate like that. But then again, Chick-fil-A is super popular and they give to anti-LGBT plus causes. So who knows? Maybe I'm wrong, and maybe her business will thrive more than I could possibly imagine. But so yeah. That's all I have to say on that because I'm rambling. And with that, I will see you guys in the next video.